Welcome to our session, Leapfrog Tomorrow's Competition with Workforce Expertise Today, 140 characters at a time. This is the sixth in a series of 7 webcasts. Today, Lacey Lowe, Executive VP Marketing at Pendexio, along with Bob Dana, Executive Chairman at Pendexio, and John Burge, CEO and co-founder at Pendexio, will share insights, perceptions, stories, and evidence for all employees of the future to be experts. Before we begin, I would like to remind you that this webcast has been pre-approved for HRCI credit and may also be used for SHRM credit. You will receive an email from hr.com within 2 business days, which will include the certification credit information. You may also log into hr.com and go to your View My Credits page where you can see all the credits you have received. If you have any questions today, please make sure you type them into the questions tab on your GoToWebinar control panel. Now it is my pleasure to turn the floor over to Lacey. Lacey, please take it.
Oh, great. Thank you so much, Sherry. So to cover off on the webcast logistics first, following the session today, we will provide each of you with a copy of our slides, which includes links to short videos that add context to the discussion we'll have today. We'll also provide a link for playback of today's conversation if you wish to share it with others. And we'll also provide our email addresses if you wish to talk with any one of us about how best to implement at your organization what we share today as key practices for building a workforce of experts. So let's get started. The financial and psychological effects of the boom and bust cycles of the last 10 years have contributed to significant job dissatisfaction among employees. This is particularly true among the highly talented segments in your workforces. Workers' discontent derive largely from diminishing advancement opportunities, from stagnant or lower recognition of their contribution, and a perception of unfair work environments, or said another way, a culture that doesn't value inclusiveness and democracy of talent. Many experts think these phenomena will have lasting effects on attitudes about the role of work and its value in employees' lives if not addressed by leadership quickly. Speaking of leaders, they care about the same challenges today that they did yesterday. You know, finding and keeping the right people with the highest levels of productivity and contribution to get business results in big ways. In that equation, it is quite obvious that talent is the most important factor and also the greatest risk variable. In the highest performing organizations, regardless of line of service or geography, actions to take for the future of work are all about people. Yesterday, we focused on answering questions like, what talent do we need? Where do we need the talent? With what skills and experiences? Those were questions that were critical for the knowledge economy. They are still important today, however, they are not enough. Today, as we shift to the era of the expert, where workers need to be more than consumers of information and knowledge builders, to succeed, we must know how to answer, how do we make every employee an expert? How do we spread their expertise? How can we assemble more experts in teams of teams, and across the entire employee network to allow us to scale our business better? And how are we sure that our experts are forming and sharing insights that make a business difference for better decisions faster? Those are the very questions that we will answer today so that your businesses are armed with a workforce of experts spreading wisdom across the entire enterprise regularly to keep moving your businesses forward in our marketplace of digital transformation and accelerated change. Knowing this, I dare you, I challenge you to let go of outdated and traditional ways of accelerating employee productivity and embrace the urgency of implementing new ways of reskilling and upskilling the workforce of the future. A workforce that expects to be expert and expects you to help them be experts faster than ever before. So today we will, one, discover that experts create and curate insights, not just content. We'll learn what insights are and why they matter to the future of work. We'll understand how to write actionable insights using an online digital coach. We'll learn how an insights rubric can be used to form high-quality, actionable insights. We'll discover how all employees can be helped to be an expert using an insight curation platform. and will realize that employee insights are an intangible asset, a measurable indicator of your organization's business valuation. To secure and retain a highly productive workforce of the future, employers should invest in developing employees. We know that. As seen by this chart, it is the #1 driver for retention of top talent and has been for some time. That is likely not new news to any of us. What we should be wondering is what about career development is important and is expected by both organizations and employees as we look towards the future. So on this chart, the data offers a significant hint. The workforce of the future will need to be problem solvers. They will need to be critical thinkers. Again, not that this expectation is any different than it ever has been, but what is different is that the expectation must be acted on. A workforce of experts solving business problems, big or small, by thinking critically, unfortunately, is not how most leaders would describe their employees today. When we spoke to leaders and gathered their responses in surveys, they said that their employees are generally overwhelmed with information and data, that their employees misplace key facts and often forget them, especially at the point of need. In fact, a sheer limitation of the human brain ability to remember and recall. They say employees frequently operate in silos, functional silos, geographical silos, and knowledge silos. They say employees think at a routine, pedestrian level, focused on simply gathering, sorting, and filtering information that's bombarding them 24/7. And they say that when their employees do have time to build a bit of knowledge, unfortunately, when they leave the organization, they take it with them and don't leave it with the team or the company. If employees in the workforce of the future, which essentially has already arrived, are not critical thinkers and therefore not experts, at best, they will be perceived by others and across the social network as lacking credibility or perhaps even incompetent. At worst, their routine, non-expert skill will be automated, leaving them perhaps without work at all. And moreover, they themselves will remain dissatisfied, disenchanted, and actively disengaged as they are unable to make a contribution at the same level as more developed, more expert peers, thus contributing to that debilitating turnover statistic we saw on the slide previous. So, Bob, do you agree with this data that I'm presenting? Do you disagree? Working formerly as a managing director at Deloitte, what have you seen in regards to critical thinking among your clients? Is critical thinking really the lifeblood of tomorrow's workforce? And are organizations equipped to help employees become experts by building those higher level thinking skills?
Those are all fantastic questions, Lacey. And in fact, we'll just spend a couple of minutes kind of setting a little bit more of a foundation around this. This just came out of Wall Street Journal just last month. And in fact, Wall Street Journal interviewed Melissa Korn, and in fact, the focus was that there's a concern in corporate America about younger workers' inability to apply critical thinking on the job. I feel that this is probably a little bit too narrow. It's an indication for sure, but my feeling is that actually it's all workers, not millennials. And especially in the future, it's going to get worse. Well, why? If you've attended one or more of our past 5 webcasts, we've looked at a lot of the trends that we're seeing driving a focus on critical thinking and a number of other skills that need to be built and be part of the workforce of that future. Why? Well, in fact, all transactional activities are moving to self-service, cognitive technologies, AI and augmented intelligence, robotics. So what's left? Well, what's left are the complex tasks, answering complex questions, making complex business decisions, thinking critically. So ultimately, it will be the critical thinkers that will thrive in the workforce. And so that's really the focus. The next slide has some good news and bad news. And in fact, the need for critical thinking, studied by Oxford and published here with Pearson as well. And so their conclusion is that there's a serious problem right now, is a gap between our skills and our wisdom. And wisdom, obviously, a direct contributor to thinking critically. So take a look at the graphic on the right-hand side. There is some good news and some bad news. Obviously, the good news is, number one, that as I look at the high school, 2-year college, 4-year college graduates, 4-year college graduates appear, based on a rating from industry, that they're showing up from a critical thinking standpoint with adequate or excellent ratings when it comes to their ability to think critically. And so that's kind of good news. Bad news is the fact that the greatest threat is that high school grads literally have 0 in terms of excellence, and most of them are deficient. And that's going to be the biggest part of our workforce, is still going to be the high school grads. My contention is that even the college grads, this data is just for now. The real question is what happens in 2020, 2025, 2030, as the trends continue to take hold in a greater and greater way. I think that even the college grads will start to be rated lower in terms of their deficit in critical thinking. Lacey has already kind of showed you the top graphic on this chart, but the business value is a function of the expertise that really does start with critical thinkers who can solve problems. And so the focus on the upper left was the critical thinking and digital literacy. I want to spend time on the other two. So again, Pearson in that same study rated critical thinking number 1 in terms of skills increasing in importance in the workplace. The key is that, let me spend a little bit of time on the left-hand lower graphic, which is a study coming out of the World Economic Forum. These are the top 10 skills for 2020. And it's interesting, you might say, well, critical thinking is number 2. Okay, well, that's fine. But let's look at number 1. Okay, complex problem solving. Well, that probably requires critical thinking. How about number 3, creativity? Probably the same. How about coordinating with others? Well, you probably don't want to coordinate with others who are not thinking critically and providing value to you in your problem solving and business processes. Number 7, judgment and decision making. The same. 10. Cognitive flexibility. So I'm looking, literally at the majority of the skills all being driven by critical thinking. Additionally, if I start to look at the Bloom's taxonomy and look where we are right now, obviously, when I'm thinking about the typical approach to literally everything, be it learning, content management, knowledge management, any of the talent management activities that we as HR professionals all are focused around, we're still, in the most part, operating at the bottom of this graphic. So remembering, understanding, applying, all on an individual basis. And there might be some collaboration, but we're still generally in that region. When I'm starting to think about critical thinkers, where do they need to operate? And then ultimately, as everything that can be automated is automated, everything that can be pushed to self-service is pushed to self-service, there's really only going to be the top of this graphic that, in fact, is going to drive value for organizations and value from an employee standpoint. So creating, evaluating, analyzing, and applying will be everything that will be focused on as critical thinkers and the contributors to the intellectual capital in an organization and ultimately the intangible value of those enterprises.
So we have this critical thinking gap, what to do about it, right? The approaches we've used in the past, critical thinking courses or workshops, case study examinations, role playing, they haven't worked. If they had, we wouldn't today have 60% of leaders as evidenced by a study conducted by PayScale in May 2016, say that their employees, again, particularly new grads, can't problem solve, can't analyze data, can't derive a well thought out solution. So I suggest, in consideration of that research and the research released in January of this year by HR.com, that to fuel expertise, employees need to be part of a network of experts who share wisdom as a team, fueled by a new type of technology. In fact, according to a 2014 McKinsey & Company analysis and study, just 21%, less than a quarter of organizations say that current talent and other HR technology always meets the need to create a network of experts who make better decisions faster. So, you know, no matter how many LMSs or learning experience platforms you buy, they will not change this dilemma because they're not designed to. Therein lies at least part of the reason for the gap between where workforce expertise is currently and where it needs to be. Quite frankly, assessing that gap today for your organization is crucial to making the right technology decisions and ensuring workforce retention and business viability tomorrow. So let me pause for a moment and reflect back on my own statements here. After consulting with more than 300 clients over the last 30 years, I too am at the head of the line with those who say that technology is not the silver bullet. It isn't, and it never will be. Agreed. If processes are not in order and not optimized, technology does nothing more than make what's broken go faster. For today's discussion, we are assuming that the opportunities around strategy, culture, process, governance, and executive engagement and the like have been prioritized and fixed, or at least in the process of being addressed in your organization. We assume that you are at least ready to listen to what the next lineup of workforce of the future, human capital operations technology looks like, and how it may have a place in an organization like yours, as it has already taken a place in the organizations of those who are leading in terms of their business impact, those who are accelerating learning, those who are building knowledge and promoting insights and wisdom among their workforce to make better decisions faster. So with your permission to talk about a new breed of next-gen Workforce 2020 human capital operations technology, a platform that moves workers from traditional content curation in the knowledge economy to insight curation in the expertise economy, well, heck, let's do it. Bob, what is the new type of this workforce of the future technology? I suspect there are tools to enable these behaviors, these critical thinking behaviors, and those tools likely come at a cost. Is the investment in this new technology really worth it, Bob?
Thanks, Lacey. That's a great question, and the answer is obviously yes. It's that simple. The traditional HR technology solutions, so learning management, talent management solutions, learning experience, engagement platforms, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, were not designed or intended to help employees ultimately build knowledge, capture and share insights, become critical thinkers, the critical actions to building a workforce of experts. And you might take exception, but this certainly would be the exception and not the rule. In fact, what I did was I pulled from the SHRM vendor directory, from the new Deloitte consulting framework, from G2 Crowd's HR software categories, from the 2018 HR technology conference technology categories. I went through all of those and said, okay, where's the expert support? Where are we going to be knowledge building? Where's the network sharing category for my wisdom, for my insights, for those things that are actually going to help me with my critical thinking? Frankly, it's coming up a little bit short. And so, one of the things that I feel is that when I'm looking at all of these different categories, and I'll just kind of focus on the Deloitte consulting framework, our focus continues to be about content, including microlearning, user-generated content, content and learning data, and associated technologies. The question is, how will this drive critical thinking? If we want to use past approaches as a basis, and I'm not saying that these are bad technologies, they're all great technologies, and they do the job that they're intended to deliver on, but we ultimately need to blend the learning, performance support, knowledge management into a new solution that drives critical thinking. and supports that critical thinking on the job in the time of need. What is this? Again, our position is that to do this, we probably need a new platform, one that actually allows us to author, accumulate, share the insights themselves. So we're calling that an insight curation platform. We're not looking to replace all of the others. We're looking to enhance, supplement those. And we're starting to see a growing number of solution providers that are evolving their platform or adding on additional functionality to do this. There's 4 defining characteristics of an insight curation platform. We think it explicitly supports higher level thinking. So training good, various learning delivery, content, et cetera, all good. The question should be, well, how does it explicitly support that higher level thinking? That's got to be the differentiation for an insight curation platform. Also, it addressed information overload and recall failure. Where contention is that only about 2% of all the content that exists and is exposed to individuals is actionable. How do we get to that 2% actionable information and use that 2% actionable information to actually drive our critical thinking and decision making? It connects a workplace of experts, and ultimately everybody will be an expert. But at this point, how do we, in fact, quickly tap the expertise of individuals, and many times do that without actually speaking to that individual? That's a major challenge. And then finally, it empowers experts to share wisdom and insights.
Great. So Bob, insight curation platform. I'm curious, insights, what are they exactly? Are they hunches? Are they opinions? What do they look like in practice? How does an insight curation platform that's a characteristic of these 4 elements that you just described, how do they enable employees to formulate and write actionable insights that matter to the employee, to the teams in which they work, and to the business overall?
I feel that in fact, insights are definitely not opinions. We've got plenty of opinions out there, and I'm not sure how you feel about Twitter and tweeting, but certainly most of that is not evidence-based insights that can be supported by and accessed by individuals to support critical thinking. And so the insight, as it's defined here, as you see, and I'll put insight and wisdom in the same category. The capacity to gain an accurate and deep understanding of a person or a thing. So what is that intuitive understanding? So in fact, what I think it is ultimately is intellectual capital. And so when I have that deep understanding distilled into an insight, that insight being able to be captured and communicated to a wide number of individuals and then used to support not only your own critical thinking, but their critical thinking, that's intellectual capital.
Great. So where do insights come from? Are they derived from these business intelligence tools that are a part of learning management systems and talent management systems, from analytics packages or tools that are so frequently talked about? Are they just sort of plucked out of this new insight curation platform? Where do they come from?
Yeah, well, they come from all of the above. They come from content, business intelligence. They come from data. They come from everything that exists right now, because we are consuming so much information, data, content. It's in our information systems, in our content and learning platforms. Generally, it is transactionally focused. And most of the time, when we're thinking about data and content at that lower level, we're really thinking about transactional employees. And then, over the last several years, we've been speaking quite a bit about the overwhelmed employee. That's really that employee that's sitting there consuming, using, leveraging content data to do their jobs, generally being overwhelmed and generally being much more transactional. However, they are gaining knowledge from that, and they are distilling insights. The light bulbs are going off left and right. They are using those insights in most cases to actually be a critical thinker and a problem solver. They need those insights. It's hard to take a 20-page document or a substantial amount of data without it being distilled, draw insights, and now those insights are being used to communicate to a client, a prospect, your management, your team, and drive that critical thinking. So the bottom line is, as I start to move from the bottom to the top of this pyramid, we are now looking at keeping the human being in the equation. The human being is in the game. So we hear all of this about artificial intelligence, taking over a lot of this. Well, they may take over some. They may take over a lot of the transactional elements. They probably are going to be a long time before they take over the critical thinker role and be a critical thinker. And so how do we keep the human being in there? And then how do we capture, distill, share the experiences, the wisdom, the insight of those individuals that have percolated that to the top of this pyramid? How do you do that? That's the real question.
So that's extremely helpful. Thank you. So insights come from humans, from the brain of people, not necessarily from information systems. So I'm hearing you say it. I hear it over and over and over again in supporting research. The real differentiator for businesses then is not data, is not information, but rather humans making meaning from information and data and using that meaning to inform evidence-based business decisions. So, Bob, say more about why businesses should invest in enabling employees to be able to form and share these actionable insights.
Yeah, great, Lacey. In fact, the insights matter because evidence shows that they are the missing link for companies that want to drive business outcomes from their data and their content. Content curation is not a new phenomenon. I mean, we've been at it now for probably the last 40 or more years in terms of actually generating and leveraging content to drive business decisions. For decades, employees have attempted to collect and sort information and data, and management has sought to derive associated quantitative business value, largely to no avail. The challenge has always been to separate the signal from the noise. In other words, that actionable 2% we talked about of that curated data and content from the rest. We believe that insight curation may be the answer to this challenge. Forrester refers to insights as the new currency of business. And today's economy is often referred to as the insight economy, or the expertise economy, or the era of the expert. I feel that in order for we to actually achieve that vision, we're going to have to do things differently in terms of actually distilling out this actionable 2% and being able to capture it, aggregate it, curate it, and share it.
Well, that is pretty powerful. Insights are the new currency of business, said Forrester. So Bob, what does that mean for the average employee? What is the human aspect of extracting business value from information, of forming and sharing insights?
The words people and insight teams are listed at the top of the Forrester research graphic that was published in Forrester in 2015. Is their role limited to setting up the processes and machines that spit out numbers and charts? Or do we rely on the minds of the humans to actually form insights as a result of information they consume? If insights are to be shared with peers for assessing them, or collaboratively determining actions or making decisions or increasing business valuation, does a person actually need to be able to reduce their writing to effective, high-quality insights? I think the answer to that is yes.
So Bob, I'm not sure what you mean by reduce their writing. What does that mean? Can you say more, offer more context about the requirements for employees to be able to write and share actionable insights? How does that look different than how they're writing and thinking today?
Well, in fact, the process is fairly straightforward, actually. Your employees already do 90% of the work. You are not just capturing and sharing the insights they already form. So they're consuming content, data, information, etc. They form insights, and then, frankly, they may capture some of those themselves in an annotation system. They might be on a sticky note. They might be on a pad. They may put it into a collaborative or sharing system that you have. But generally, it's at that content level. So we think that the overlooked step is saving and sharing that insight. There's, again, merging number of platforms. We're going to show you in a second. John will show you the couple of screens from the SmartSnips platform. But we think that that's going to be the next generation of our approach.
So, Bob, when employees actually start to write and share high-quality insights, what does the insight look like? Is it a sentence? Is it a paragraph? Is it a picture? How do we distinguish ineffective insights from insights that are actionable, from insights that are usable and high quality, from insights that make a business difference?
Yeah, that is, again, a great question. I'm going to take us back just for a moment, because now we've jumped across to insights and kind of left critical thinking in the dust. So I'm going to go back to thinking critically, because there's been a lot of research done on that. There's 4 elements that have been described. This one recently from Ford's a couple of years ago. Because the information, because the formation of high quality insights relies on critical thinking, the first question really is, what are those key critical thinking elements? And we've seen this over again: alignment, context, relevance, specificity, novelty, and clarity come out of that. So there's kind of the 6 that we have been focused on. We think these are actually the seeds of a rubric that can be developed, and we've developed them. We're going to show it to you in a moment, to assist individuals to write effective insights. So if this is what I'm trying to achieve when it comes to critical thinking, these 6 elements, then what do we need to do in terms of constructing a good insight? And then can we develop a rubric? And then even further, can we go ahead and develop algorithms to determine whether something is a good insight or not? The answer is yes. So we actually came up with a model, spent about a year on this with both the research and a number of testing activities that we conducted. And so you see that we distilled this from an insight standpoint into 4 different elements. Whether or not the insight has a component or components that are analytical, whether they have components or elements that are actionable, contextual, and factual. And so those, in fact, all align to the elements that we just talked about that will drive critical thinking. But now I can actually start wrapping those with an ability to set a rubric, a formula, okay, and then link that to algorithms that will check on the insight and its ability to address any one of these 4 different elements. So as you notice in each one of the boxes there, what those are, so I'll give you an example. Analytical kind of reflects the analytical thinking about the evidence, because this is all evidence-based, and how it forms action. And so, how do you do this? Well, what we did was went through it, like I said, about a year's worth of research, and started to look at, well, if I'm thinking about thesis, sentence, and other things, okay, how do I actually look for an analytical nature of that? Well, it's probably based on analytical verbs. If I start looking at the same thing for actionable, it's probably based on action verbs, contextual modal verbs, and factual, probably some data, a percent, an age, something that effectively gives me factual elements. And then the algorithms are used to automate the rubric, to actually get us down to scoring it and the impact that insight will have to support critical thinking. So the insight scoring system that we're using is in fact a 5-element scoring system. Think about it just like when you go on and create a password and you want to figure out what the strength of that password is a little meter, 5 elements, and based on the strength of the meter, it tells you it's poor, it's okay, it's great. And so same thing with insights. You can actually, in having a rubric that's agreed to, you can now kind of build that out to incorporate that into an algorithm and then actually put scoring into it. It's interesting because you might say, well, how do I come up with one score? Because analytical, actionable, contextual, and factual may not be the same for all industries, for functions, for disciplines, for the enterprise outcomes desired from critical thinking. And your answer is yes. So obviously the algorithm should have weightings that you can adjust that says, hey, in a given industry, I may want it to be more heavily weighted towards analytical and contextual, or in others, factual and contextual. And so by being able to adjust the weightings, you can in fact adjust the elements of the algorithm to adjust the way that the rubric is applied and ultimately the way that the scoring is appearing.
So as organizations then invest in shifting employees from lower level thinking peddlers of information to higher order critical thinking insights experts, it's refreshing to know that we have an evidence-based model or rubric, as you've discussed and presented here, Bob, to guide their efforts. Do you have examples of how leading organizations are applying this rubric to shift employees to critical thinking experts, writing actionable insights?
We do, and in fact, if I still kind of take those 4 different elements of the rubric, you can see that we have facts, analytical verbs, modal verbs, and action verbs. And I've color-coded 4 different ones depending upon a given audience. So if in fact the audience is HR and business leaders, I'm showing you an example of a highly scored insight. A consultant or advisor who might be using this, kind of navigating to, using this from one of their colleagues to have a conversation with a client, prospective client, maybe members of their team, a healthcare sales and contact center rep. This might be a nice conversation where they're speaking to a patient or one of the physicians that might be calling in or being called on from a sales or a sales rep standpoint. You can see that this one distilled insight that could be supported again by a whole 15 pages of research could be accessed and used by me to have a conversation, even though Lacey might have written it. And so the other thing that you see on this page is kind of interesting. Since Twitter and tweets are starting to become kind of second nature to everyone. The question is, how could you even take that 140 character size and use that as a basis for communicating an insight? So what we've done in each one of these is 140 characters. And so if in fact I look at the healthcare salesperson walking in and having a conversation, poor nutrition is #1 cause of 30% of cancers in developed countries. Advocating oncologists should study nutrigenomics to better serve patients. Wow, that would be a real kind of showstopper in a conversation with someone if you showed up with that, and if it's especially supported by the research or other documents. There's your 2%. It's probably 0.2% of the actual research itself.
Wow, Bob, thanks for all the rich sharing and the lowdown on the mission criticality of critical thinkers and insights experts as the sole descriptors for the workforce of the future. John, thanks for standing by. Obviously, Bob and I got into a pretty passionate discussion here. I heard from his discussion as well as many of the pieces of research that I, you, and others read, that there's this new next-gen category of human capital operations technology that enables every employee, regardless of length of service, regardless of age, ethnicity, race, to be an expert. And that new technology that we're calling Insight Curation Platform, for lack of a better name, exists today, and it includes this built-in online coach to score insights so employees can get better and better and better at thinking critically and writing insights that can be shared and used to solve business problems. Can you tell us about this new breed of technology and how this online scoring coach that Bob's referring to, how does this thing work in action?
Absolutely, and thanks, Lacey. First thing we're going to do is we're going to talk at a high level what it does. Then we're going to walk through some screenshots so you can to kind of bring that to life, so you can get a sense and sort of visualize it. And then once you've got that foundation, then we'll show you how we actually execute the insight scoring in the software itself, and as well as kind of the digital coaching that goes along with it. So at a high level, an insight curation platform effectively does three things. First, it enables employees to capture their insights in workflow at the time and place of formation, which is as easy as using an annotation system or a clipping system, very familiar in terms of the user interface experience. The second thing it does is they get captured in a proprietary data structure we call the Smart Snip, which automatically hyperlinks the insights to both the evidence, which is the excerpt of content that triggered the insight, as well as the underlying source content. And it is really this sort of this packaging and this structure of packaging the insight with the evidence and context that's the key to insights which have impact, credibility, and long-term knowledge value. They never lose their context. They never lose the evidence that triggered them. And the third thing it does is the insights then all get stored in a shared company cloud that employees can access anytime, anywhere on any device. So with that, let's now look at some screenshots of what this actually looks like. So you're now looking at a document inside a SmartSnips content viewer. This is going to look like an annotation system, and that's by design. To capture an insight, you see that you can sort of simply draw a box with your mouse around an excerpt of content that triggered an insight, and then you just simply type in or record that insight and add one or more tags and hit save. And that's it. And this automatically captures that insight in that SmartSnips data structure, which kind of is overlaid kind of a little bit on the lower right-hand side there with the call-outs. And that's what packages the content excerpt in the full curated source. And if you click on the thumbnail for the source, it'll launch and rotate to the exact page in SnipSpot, kind of the exact same view you see in the bigger part of the screen above. So you can go exactly right back to where it came from. And that's what provides the credibility and impact. And if we think from a sort of connect the dots analogy to represent critical thinking, think of this kind of SmartSnips we captured here as one dot that we've now captured that could potentially be connected. Now, before we connect the dots, first we're just going to collect them in one spot, right? Because you might consume a lot of content and be capturing insights from lots of different pieces of content. And think of the topic, a SmartSnips topic, as essentially a container for aggregating your insights or those of your team about a topic, which might come from multiple team members, multiple pieces of content. Now, if you click on any of these insights, they will expand to show the full SmartSnip. You can reorder them, you can group and sequence them, which is really where the critical and analytical thinking gets started in terms of how the various insights, which might come from a lot of different people and content sources, relate to each other and collectively inform higher level insights and actions and decisions. Now, as those higher level insights start forming in people's heads about kind of how these different dots relate to each other, at any time they can copy this content, they can sort of copy this topic into another structure we call a hyperpoint. And that's where they connect the dots with higher level insights. So pop over there to the hyperpoint. So this is the hyperpoint. Now the insights that were kind of showed as card-like objects before are now kind of compressed. So they're the blue insights with the kind of the gray box around them, the blue lines of text with the gray borders. And now they're displayed in a compact fashion, so employees can now juxtapose and process several of them together in a set, because we're kind of moving to the next level, moving to that higher level insights, we're moving to that more critical thinking where we want to connect these together. And that's what the black text box above and below represent. Some of them look like numbered headers. Those are the higher level insights that employees have now formed and then entered in response to their grouping and sequencing of the insights. And this is all drag and drop to reorder things. And if you click on one of those blue insights, it will crack open. If you go one more click, you should see it kind of crack and open down there on the right-hand side to reveal the entire Smart Snip. And then when you're on that Smart Snip, if you click on the document thumbnail, it'll launch the document again, rotate the exact page and snip spot. So you have this very drill down, package. And think of Smart Snips as modular units of thinking that enable employees to connect the dots simply by dragging and dropping and rearranging and adding these higher level insights. And they truly require critical thinking to create. And they enable us to then actually measure and manage critical thinking in a way that was never before possible. Because they're executing in this system, we can actually track it, measure it, and get analytics on it. Now, all this gets stored in a shared company cloud, which you kind of see here, which is really a running index of all the insights and really all the topics and hyperpoints, all the critical thinking that's taking place across the company. You can search it, you can browse tags and people. And compared to Google search, where you get a list of whole documents to read, here you get the insights of your colleagues who already read all of that content. They've already boiled all this overwhelming content down to 140 character evidence-based insights, which reflect their knowledge and expertise. And same thing with hyperpoints, which are even higher value, smaller objects formed by your colleagues' critical thinking. They even compress the information further. Next slide. So now what we can also do is we can now get analytics on all of this. So we can finally see, measure, and quantify the thinking that takes place across the workforce. And this enables us to answer questions like, basic questions like, how much content do employees even consume? How many insights do they form when they do that? To what extent are they critically thinking about those insights? Are they connecting the dots across them? And this is high value stuff. This is all intellectual capital that we need to start capturing, measuring, and quantifying. And I've only covered the upper left widget on the dashboard here so far and everything I've talked about. Up until now, everything you see in here has been a black box. Once you start curating insights digitally, it opens up that black box and a treasure trove of possibilities for what learning teams could do with the intelligence. Next slide. So this also enables us to move to the next level of human performance, which we believe is helping employees articulate great insights, as Bob covered in detail earlier. And by great insights, we mean challenging employees to think analytically about the information they're consuming. How does it apply to their business context? To what extent could it or should it inform actions or decisions? Essentially, how are they using and applying information, which runs right at the core of what knowledge workers are supposed to be doing. And this is where the rubric comes in that Bob talked about for evidence-based insights. And we've developed a way to automatically apply that rubric to insights in real time, like a spell checker or a password analyzer. So employees get immediate feedback on how well-formed their insights are. So that's that meter you see there. And you click on the meter, you get that breakdown of the score that you also see there underneath insight strength. And you'll recognize those components from kind of the rubric that Bob showed you. And again, very similar to a password analyzer, instant feedback, click on it, get detail on the breakdown of what led to your score. And you can click on any component of that breakdown and receive instant coaching and guidance on how to get a better score on that component by component right in the system. Our belief is that employees have far more knowledge inside their heads about how information can be used to drive operational excellence. And it's time for us to empower them to save and share those insights so they and their colleagues can really use them to drive the business forward. Any other thoughts on that one, Bob? And I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, I'll give one additional thought, because Lacey kind of said earlier on about effectively the democratization of this insight capture and sharing is going to be a very important part of the future, and I can't emphasize that enough. As we're thinking about kind of the current workforce, you might have a millennial or Gen Z with a year's tenure in an organization might be extremely knowledgeable in one topic or another, but may be marginalized because of their lack of tenure or their age, or any number of other things that might contribute to this. And we're talking about the diversity of the workforce, the inclusion of different thought. This will now start to allow us to kind of institutionalize through a technology the democratization of insights. And this actual the rubric and the tool and the coaching system that's built into this will also start to take away some of the intimidation that might be there in terms of, oh, my insight isn't good enough or whatever. Well, this in fact is going to allow those individuals who have the insights, who have something to share, who's going to be able to leverage that to support critical thinking and the generation of intellectual capital and intangible value of an organization. It in fact is all built in here.
So it seems then that the 2015 Forrester research actually was well ahead in describing insights as being the new business currency, and it appears to be quite accurate. Those organizations then that are leveraging this new technology, this insight curation platform that has yet to find a category of its own on many of these checklists, to augment human intelligence to help shift workforces from knowledge workers to insights experts, will indeed be the ones on top of the pile over the next year, 2, 3, 5, 10. These organizations will find themselves measuring intellectual capital and other intangible assets, not just revenue and defects and employee engagement, to indicate to the market their business value. So I have to say out loud, expertise and insight as a way of getting work done, and intellectual capital as a way of measuring business success defines the workforce of the future. And as I challenged you earlier, I challenge you now, is ignoring them worth your peers outperforming you? So thank you, John. Thank you, Bob, for sharing perceptions, wisdom, experiences, know-how, data, and dare I say insights that make the criticality of intangible assets as a key component of business valuation of the new ways in which employees of the future are working to enhance learning, to become experts and participate effectively in high-performance teams. And John, special call out to you for introducing us to Pandexio's SmartSnips Insight Curation platform, the only insight curation technology that I'm aware of available in the market today that can be layered on to your existing LMSs, your existing talent management technology systems, your existing learning experience platforms like Degree, PathGather, EdCap for expert decisions faster and for higher levels of organizational and tangible value. So Sherry, that wraps up our messages for today. And for now then, we're eager to kind of fold in the participants with us, take their questions, address their comments, invite their observations and their insights about the discussion we had today. I don't know if you see any questions for us or anyone with a comment that we can join in with us here in the discussion.
I don't see anything yet, Lacey, but I do want to remind everybody on the call with us to go to their GoToWebinar control panel. You may have to find that by clicking on the little orange button with the white arrow to make it reappear on your screen, and find the questions tab and just type your question or comment in there for Lacey, Bob, and John.
Great, thanks, Sherry. We'll stand by here for a minute.
Yeah, I think as we're waiting, I'm just going to kind of pop this slide up. It'll be in your deck when you get it, but we feel that kind of the focus of most organizations right now, they're still saying that the employees are the #1 corporate expense and risk. And we're seeing this actually discussed more and more at the board of directors level, the C-suite. They get it. And so we think a major component of thinking about the employees and their contribution to the intangible value of an organization is going to be associated with their insights. As you can see, if those insights are lost, our contention is that this is going to add substantially to business risk. and probably will be more and more discussed at that C-level and board of directors level. And that lost knowledge, the facts, findings, the training, lessons learned, et cetera, are all things that are lost. If they're lost and somebody walks out the door, or they're lost because someone did not capture and share it, that's a major decrement in terms of the value of an organization. But if in fact the insights are retained and are shared, we say, and you saw in that one diagram that John showed, we think that we can now start to quantify the contribution that insights represent in intellectual capital. So those ideas, innovation, collective wisdom, the expertise is now captured, shared, and actually is adding to accelerate the innovation that's going on in the organization. And we feel in many parts of the organization, it's going to add to improved productivity as well, which are probably more of those tangible elements of business value that your CFO is worried about. So, Sherry, any additional questions pop in? Otherwise, I think we're probably kind of closing in on this, and I'll let Lacey say a couple of words about next webcast.
Great, thanks so much, Bob. And so, yeah, that wraps us up here for today. Join us again, if you will, in January. The date will be released here shortly when we carry on this conversation and have more discussion around workforces that are successful in moving their employees from information users to insights experts and really step up to being an insights-driven organization. That's it, Sherry. Thank you.
Awesome, Lacey. Thank you so much. I also want to thank Bob and John. It's always such an informative webcast with the three of you. So thank you so much for that today. Much appreciated. Now, just a reminder that this webcast will be available in HR.com archives for up to 7 days for our free members and without restrictions for those with a certification membership. Your webcast credits are stored in your HR.com account, and we will also be sending you out the credit information in an email. Your feedback is very important to us. Please do take a couple of moments to fill out the exit survey that will appear on your screen once this room has been closed. Thanks everyone for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day.